Hi, everyone. I'm excited to introduce you to Vince BERTRAM. Vince is a true innovator. He's a best-selling author, a speaker who focuses on education, innovation, and career learning. And today, because we're approaching the back-to-school season, we are going to talk about the world of education, technology, and a little bit about Gen Z. We're turning our attention to Vince's new venture, his startup that he will tell us about in a few minutes. And also, we'll talk about the Gen Z because it's both a mystery and a fascination for marketers. And Vince, who has a deep understanding of this audience because he had worked closely with them, hopefully will share some insights with us that will be helpful to us as marketers. So, hi Vince, welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. Very
Thank you.
exciting. And my first question is could you share a little bit about your new project, Recruited? What inspired you to start this new venture in the EdTech? And what's the story behind the vision of this project?
Great. Well, again, thank you for having me, and excited to share this time with you. When I think about um, the entrepreneurial mindset or integral mindset, which is a phrase that, a word that we've started using over the last decade or so, of innovators who are thinking deeply about new products, different ways of using products within their existing business. So I've always had this entrepreneurial mindset, but I think the best entrepreneurs are those who go into a venture trying to solve a problem
Mhm.
and and then figuring out how to come up with solutions. I've actually been working on this for almost 3 decades, and the whole idea around career learning and helping students understand the kind of careers available to them and how to think differently and dream differently about their future. And so we're building this platform that's going to help students understand how business works, all the industries available, the kind of careers available to them. So hopefully they can make informed decisions before they leave high school and start a very expensive exploration process, whether it's in college or just going directly to the workforce. But that's what we're doing. We're excited about it, but it's absolutely focused on a Gen Z mindset. And so many ed tech products are designed for school, and we're designing for students.
Um, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What did you find the most challenging aspect of this venture, of this startup?
I think there are two things. An idea is certainly something you have to have, and a business plan how to accomplish that. But obviously, fundraising in the entrepreneurship space, getting the right kind of investors is very challenging. But perhaps even more challenging is making sure you have the right talent to
Mm,
deliver on the promises that you say you're going to deliver. And when you really think about this from a visionary perspective or a company, and I think it's true across every enterprise, is that you may have a vision for what you want to do, but you have to have people who can actually do it. And so for me, getting the right people on this team has been critical.
mhm.
And I'm very pleased, very excited about the people who are part of this venture.
Yeah, it's true that now we're entering the era of communication, and the teams and the communication is definitely everything. And talking about the new trends, I had a few questions about the Gen Z because I was
Yeah,
very excited. You have worked with them for decades, and
yeah.
you know them better than anyone here. So I was hoping if you could describe some common characteristics or trends that you have observed among this generation. How does this affect their approach to education, to their career choices, and maybe even life choices or even consumer choices?
Yeah, great questions, Maria. There are a number of things, and one thing I have heard repeatedly over the last 5, 6 years in particular is companies saying, this generation doesn't want to work. This generation doesn't have loyalty to people. And it turns out that that's not true. That in fact, they do want to work and they're really concerned about their future. But the other is loyalty in what I would call the job movement and people leaving positions didn't start with employees. They actually started with companies who found quarterly results and performance metrics more important than people. And when they didn't hit those results, they laid people off, or you hit a recession and jobs were lost. And one of the things that we know about every generation, one is there is a defining moment. There's something in the generation that completely shifted their perspective. If you go back to, the millennial generation, I mean, their defining moment was 9/11. Gen Z, they have a major defining moment, and it was COVID.
Oh, right.
The pandemic. So what changed during that time? And there we found that there are a number of things that have changed. You go back every generation from the wars to 9/11 to even going back to the silent generation and the Great Depression. I mean, each generation is defined. So we need to pay particular attention to what changed. And there are a couple of things that changed dramatically in this generation. COVID is one. The other is they saw their parents go through a great recession. They saw mass layoffs. They saw, people really struggling, and they're seeing inflation that we haven't seen in decades. So all these things are part of this generation, and it is defining the way they think about the world of work. So before I really talk about what's changing from their perspective, there are some other really important characteristics of Gen Z. Think about this. This was the first generation that could see the other person they're talking to on the phone, right?
Right.
And I think about when I was growing up, I had the first bag phone, right? Now they're on these handheld devices that give them enormous power, and they're talking to someone they're seeing. We didn't do that in prior generations. And they text with emojis, and they don't use email. Right?
They can talk with emojis. They can express the whole sentence with emojis. I think I even saw some sort of a meme about that, how you can write the whole story without using a single word.
And you can, and they do. And they know what it means. It's just, we don't know what it means. And I think that's a real problem, right? When we think about the way they communicate. Also realizing they spend 6 or 7 hours a day on personal devices and apps. This is the way they get information, they communicate, learn. I mean, everything is on their personal devices in these apps, and they're influenced like no prior generation. Right? One of the things that happens in every generation, I talked about these defining moments, but we also know that every generation is heavily influenced on the one before them. And there's a lot of question about when these dates change, but the reality is it's a little fuzzy, like whether it's 2013 or 2012. We don't know exactly. There's a lot of debate about it, but regardless, what we know is the prior generation influences. So it's not only a Gen Z thing, it's going to be the alpha generation. It's the one that's coming. That's going to be a 2 billion person generation. It's going to be the largest generation on Earth, right? So if we think what's changing with Gen Z is going to have an effect on us, it's certainly going to happen over the next 10 years with the alpha generation. And so what are their expectations? One is they do have expectations. They want purpose. They're really interested in why people do what they do, why companies make what they make, how they do it, and that they want to feel connected to it. They also want a lot of flexibility. I think this comes right from COVID. Right? When they were learning from home, they were working from home, working from anywhere. It just so happens that expectation didn't change coming out of COVID. They still want that flexibility.
Yes.
They also want relevance and they want value. Right? So this has a lot of implications, I think, for companies, retailers, higher education, employers. If you can't make things relevant for them and show them great value, they're not interested in it. And it turns out that Gen Z, they're also savers and they're pretty frugal. Right? I mean, one of their favorite brands is Goodwill. Right?
Okay.
I mean, they love to shop, and at those places, brand names, high cost things are much less interesting to Gen Z than we find some of these off brands, cheaper type of things. So if you put all those together, value, relevance, being frugal, having purpose and flexibility, it has tremendous implications for people who want to sell them things. I'll give an example. In higher education, the 4-year college degree is under enormous attack. The Gen Z thinks about college very differently than the millennials. Right? For years, we thought it was college for all, that you had to go to college. Gen Z is questioning that. They're saying, am I getting the value out of it? And is it worth it? And as a result, college admissions, or not admissions, college enrollment is going down. And pretty significantly. The last couple of things I'll share, and I think this has an implication from an employment standpoint. It turns out that money and benefits really matter to Gen Z. I've heard people for generations say to me, it's not about the money. Anytime someone says to me, it's not about the money, it's usually about the money. Right? But they want to know, how much are you going to pay me for what I'm worth? And I want benefits. So I'll give it a perfect example. I still see employers that give this 3-page job description, okay, and they want to attract Gen Z. First of all, you're not going to attract them. Right?
Oh, they're not reading that long of a description?
Yeah, it's 3 pages. They're not reading through that stuff. I would tell employers, if you can't tell your story in 1 paragraph and tell them everything they want to know, you're not going to attract them. Okay? And I think this is true in marketing, and certainly going to be true from any value proposition that we're trying to create. We got to get to the fast, we got to get the message and make sure we hit these things. And they have, for years we told people, just follow your dreams and everything will work out. It was such irrational advice then. And Gen Z is calling the bluff. Gen Z is saying, listen, that doesn't really work. And I know that doesn't work. And, so we just have to show them different ways of really pursuing these pathways and just aligning with their expectations. And when I think about influencers, right, I mean, think about where students spend their time, or Gen Z spends their time. Right? They're not reading the Wall Street Journal. Right? They're not reading traditional media. They're on TikTok and YouTube, number 1 and number 2. Right? They're on Instagram. They're being influenced by people. If you look at top influencers on TikTok, the top 5 influencers have almost 600 million followers. Right? I mean, think about that. That's almost 2 times the U.S. population.
Yeah, right.
Right? And they're influencing them in bite-sized videos. And they're giving it to them in a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And then they swipe and they move on to the next thing. If we ignore this, it's our own peril. If we ignore the way they want to, how they get their information, how they consume it, and how they process it. Okay? If we don't take those things seriously, I think businesses are going to really struggle.
I see. Given all these behavior patterns that you mentioned, and especially the attitude to work that you also mentioned, that they do want to get paid and they're not shy about it, They're skeptical about the follow your dream concept. It's
Yeah.
not that they don't like it, but maybe they doubt, whatever the parents are saying, how it is supposed to be. Are there any industries or professions that are more attractive to this generation than others? Is it like everyone just wants to be a TikTok blogger and make millions, or is it just like a stereotype?
No, I think it's more of a stereotype. I think it's easy to create content today, right? And I don't know. I think that certainly it just create a career path for some people, but it's like any other career path. There are people who make a lot of money, and most people don't, right?
Mhm.
But it is for some, it's going to be a pathway. For others, it's going to be a hobby, and just what they do in their spare time. So I don't. When I look across industries, right, I think there are some that are struggling right now. I don't believe it's strictly because of Gen Z characteristics. Some are just the structural nature of a job and a career. I'll give you an example. Okay? People wanting to go into teaching.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Gen Z in so many ways, okay, they want purpose, they want relevance, okay, but school doesn't necessarily offer them a lot of flexibility. Like here's
Mm-hmm.
a structured day, here's what that looks like, and the other is that they uh, it doesn't pay well,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're looking at us like, why would I want to do that? So not as many people going into education, going into teaching. So I just think that it's not necessarily industries that are winning or losing. Because you look at manufacturing, for instance, I mean, a robust industry. It's not that Gen Z doesn't want to go into manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to connect with the things that are important to them. And I think companies have a chance to do that. From a marketing perspective, it's just getting the right messaging. Now, it's not being disingenuous
Mm-hmm.
or intellectually dishonest with them, but it's telling the story and telling in a way that's compelling for Gen Z. I think is going to be really important to attract them in any industry. I do believe there are some industries, if they fail to tell the story, it's going to be much more difficult to get Gen Z to pursue careers in their companies.
From what you've just said, it seems like storytelling has become way more important for both brands and companies if they want to address the Gen Z. So we need to find new ways of visual and all other types of storytelling. Is that something that the marketers should look into? Probably.
I think it's all about storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I kind of say this facetiously, but it can't be fiction. Right? We can tell the story, but we just need to hit these key elements, things that are really important to the people we're trying to recruit as potential employees or customers. It turns out that in many ways, those expectations are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And people, Gen Z says we want relevance, we want purpose, we want value. They want that as an employee, but they also want it as a consumer. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't share that with them, then I just think we're going to have a very difficult time attracting them. And I pointed out earlier, Gen Z is going to be a big influence on the alpha generation. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have 3.5, billion people, right, in the next two generations here coming through with these kind of expectations, and it's only going to continue to deepen with the alpha generation.
Did you also mention that Gen Z is affecting the way they behave? They are affecting the generations that were before them, the millennials as well?
Well, I think what starts to happen, millennials started using technology. Then all of a sudden you have this shift to Gen Z and obviously heavy technology. They're digital natives. This is what they've grown up with. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't, a lot of times when we think about, innovation and so forth, we think about a generation or even generational changes where they know nothing else, right? This is all they know. And this is their experience. And it does have an effect on everyone around them, because when they go into the workplace or in schools, they bring an expectation that other people have to adapt to. Okay? And so people are becoming more tech savvy. People are finding different ways to connect with Gen Z. And as a result, it starts to change the overall culture of a company or an organization. So yes, it has that influence. And again, they're certainly going to push it down into alpha generation, but I think they push it up too. And it's not uncommon to see people from earlier generations sitting with Gen Z and just talking with them, like, show me how you interact with technology. How do you use this app? What is an app for this? And today it's just commonplace for everyone to use apps. But that really only came into and became highly significant with Gen Z.
Actually, one more question about relationship with other generations. Something that I hear quite often, especially in the work environment, and I would be very curious to know whether you agree with that or not, is that the Gen Z employees tend to feel entitled, not very willing to learn, very skeptical about authority of whoever is superior to them. Is that something that you have also observed? And if yes, what is the best way to communicate with them? If not from the position of superiority, then maybe a different way.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I hear the same arguments.
And
I hear.
I haven't had so much experience with that to state whether it's true or not. So that's why it's very curious to hear. How do you see that?
It, one competitor in this marketplace that had grew tremendously during COVID is the gig economy.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about all the things the gig economy has created. Okay? You work when you want.
Mm-hmm.
You can do multiple jobs. So you have total flexibility. You can take trips that you want that you think are of high value. You can decline trips you don't want that you think are lower value. All the things that Gen Z wants are actually found in the gig economy. Right?
Mm.
So when people go to work, and this is particularly true, it's not just Gen Z though. I mean, go back in prior generations. I mean, we've had strikes. Why do we have strikes? Because people didn't like the working conditions. They didn't like their salary and compensation. They didn't like management. We've been striking for generations and rejecting what's happening in the workplace. Gen Z just brings a different perspective to it. For them, there are other things that kind of matter. Like what happens in the gig economy? You get paid every day. You can literally, if you're an Uber driver, you can take your money on a daily basis, right? They go to the workplace and we say you're going to wait 2 weeks for a paycheck. Right? I mean, it's just the opposite of what they can do.
Yeah.
Right? Or we tell them that here are all the workplace requirements, and here are the dress codes and all the things that have been historically part of organizations. We're trying to apply the same expectations to a generation that has different expectations. So we just need to figure out, do we want to embrace them? Do we want to create conditions that allow for people to grow in our companies? Gen Z they want value, they want relevance, and they want an opportunity to grow. Right? And I hear people joking about this. So, they're there for 2 months and they want a raise and they want a promotion.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should think about that a little differently, right? Like, so as an example, let's say you're going to give, just pick a number, 3% raise for the year. That's what you're going to do. Why not give it to them every month or every quarter? It's the same amount of money, right? It may run into some cash flow issues, but you're doing the same thing, but you're actually meeting their needs. They want a raise instead of every year, they want it more frequently. You
Mm-hmm.
want an opportunity to grow in your career paths. Create those career paths for them. Show them that you can actually do this. Instead, we have a lot of employers sit back and just complain about their expectations.
Yeah.
I just believe we should align with them, and they'll tell you what their expectations are. Right? So anyway, you put all that together. This is a tremendous opportunity for us. And for the marketers, the companies who get this right, they're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But look who's winning right now.
Yeah, that's actually was my question. Who is winning right now with the Gen Z?
TikTok, YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think YouTube could have been viewed as this archaic platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. You know who owns YouTube? It's Google, right?
Yeah.
And so Google has the number one and number two search engines in the world with YouTube and Google, right? And they have a platform in YouTube that Gen Z really likes.
Mm-hmm.
It's second. They're second. It's the second largest app they use with TikTok. Things like Instagram. I mean, they're winning. Gamification is winning, right? Giving students these short, different kinds of experience. They're winning. Right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of traditional companies are struggling, and they're going to continue to struggle. Some are just going away. Just not the way they're going to buy things. Today, Amazon is winning, and why is Amazon winning? They're one of the most trusted companies in the world. Gen Z expects things to happen fast, right? So they go to Amazon, they order something, it's delivered the same day or the next day, and they deliver on time every time, right? And so what does that mean? It means that these companies are aligned with their customers, right? And they're meeting their needs. And why would you go spend 5 hours in a mall when you can spend 5 minutes on Amazon? And they're questioning that. That's the value proposition that companies like Amazon are bringing to them. So a lot of opportunity here.
And it's interesting that you're mentioning Amazon. That is a huge corporation. And I'm wondering, given that Gen Z is very attentive to the values, how could like a small business or a startup enter into their consumer landscape if they cannot provide such a level of service of Amazon yet, but yet they might, offer a super sustainable product, or something that aligns with their values in a different way. So my question is more like, will the corporations win just because they offer better logistics, or startups also have hope here?
Yeah, I think we all hope that startups have a great deal of hope here. But here's what I believe. I think any business enterprise can treat their customers really well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some of it is scale, and some of it is, and are there scale advantages? Of course there are, right? But it doesn't mean a small business can't be laser focused on meeting customer needs and
Mm-hmm.
customer expectations. And as soon as you get away from that, that's when you lose. Okay? You just need, and I would say to small businesses, your customer, that's the key relationship. Right? And you can't lose sight of that. And so customers, if they create value, and I do believe too, there are places, and this is anecdotal for me, but there are places where I think Gen Z is much more forgiving when they see the purpose in an organization. They see what they're doing, why they're doing it. They're a little more forgiving on some of this, right? But focus on purpose, focus on customer satisfaction. A good friend of mine He ran a bank, right? And he had a lot of shareholders. And I asked him once, like, how many of your shareholders have direct access to you?
Mm-hmm.
And I was expecting, here are the large shareholders, institutions. And he looked at me and goes, they all do. And even though that's probably not true, that was the culture that he created, is he
Mm-hmm.
wanted all of them to feel like they had direct access to him. I see companies, that are incredibly frustrating, right? And using AI, for instance, and
Yeah.
other type of experiences where they're starting to lose the customer connectivity. And I would say, you know, Gen Z does like efficiency. Okay? They want to cut through things quickly. You give them 8 different options because your menu items have changed. Okay? They're not going to stick with you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They get tired of that. They want something that's simple, answers a question, efficient. Any size business can do that really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. That was amazing. Just my very last question to sum
Yes.
up a little bit what we were talking about. If we're about to give the businesses some advice or tips, what are the most important things to for their marketing to cater to Gen Z? We would tell them think about your purpose. We will tell them think about the customer satisfaction, being accessible and available for your customers. Think about your storytelling. Anything else I'm forgetting here?
I think you got it. I mean, those are the issues, right? But just being able to capture all that in a very succinct way for Gen Z is important. And don't hide behind things, right? It's like tell the story, but don't hide.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are so many people, and I've heard this from companies. You have states now that are changing laws to require it, like where they're not posting salaries. And they'll just put competitive compensation. That doesn't get it for Gen Z. Tell them how much money they're going to make. Right? Don't hide behind it. And a lot of people do that because they're concerned about the internal equity question, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone else gets to see their salary. Their competitors see their salary. It doesn't really matter. The
Mm-hmm.
bottom line is, people want to know how much they're going to get paid. They want to know what the benefits are. Treat people with respect. Treat them equitably, and then tell that story. I think it's just really, really powerful.
Okay, great. So we will add to the purpose, storytelling, and customer satisfaction. We will add honesty, transparency, right?
Yes.
And treat them with respect. That's
Yes.
that's a great
Yes.
start, which seems
But,
easy on
but
paper, maybe not so
yeah.
easy.
But I
Yeah.
would also, one other thing I would add, and this is not necessarily a marketing, but it ends up being a marketing strategy,
Mm-hmm.
is do whatever you can to take care of the culture of your company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the way you take care of the culture of your company is getting the right people. Okay? And that's a mistake I've made at times where
Mm-hmm.
we've hired fast instead of hiring smart. And we've allowed people to affect our culture in a less than desirable way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to run people away, you want to run Gen Z away, just put them with people who don't treat them well, right?
Yeah.
And don't share the same vision and conviction that you have as your company. And if you put people like that and surround them, and with a support system and encouragement, we can win with this generation, and I'm convinced we're going to. So, you have a long list now of things to add to the marketing strategy around it. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Vince.
hey, you're welcome.
That was an amazing conversation, and I hope to see you again soon in this same series where you can talk about a success story of your new startup.
I can't wait. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.